Hey, what's up? It's Todd, and today I want to teach you how to turn every interaction sexual and get from meet to sex while avoiding painful, embarrassing rejections. See, as I've been teaching pickup for over a decade, I've noticed that almost every mistake I see from students involves escalation. It's when they're trying to move the conversation, the interaction forward, that they have these errors, all right? So I'm going to teach you my 3-step process to escalate perfectly every single time. And the 3 steps are timing, technique, and tension. First off, let's talk about timing. When should you escalate and when shouldn't you? All right, this is one of the biggest things I see guys do wrong. So the key idea is this: when the interaction's going well, you should be escalating almost always. When the interaction is going poorly, you almost never should be escalating, okay? Because when it's going well, you have a lot of what I call social capital, sort of good vibes, good feelings between you and her that you can sort of spend or risk on the escalation. When things are going badly, you have very few, and so if you spend them, you end up ending the interaction, okay? So let's look at this. Right here, this is the range, this middle part, this is the range of a good interaction. If you go too far up here or too far down here, that's a bad interaction. So the idea is whenever you're in that middle part, you should be escalating from 0 over here to sex over here. And in fact, the straightest line, the quickest way is 0 to sex as a straight line, okay? Now, there are 2 huge mistakes I see guys make. The first is what I call the half-hour conversation to nowhere. And that's the guy that's over here and he's within that good range, but he just keeps talking and talking and talking and never escalating. Spends half an hour, 6 years with a girl, ends up in the friend zone and never takes it forward in a sexual way, right? He was in that good range and he failed to escalate. That's the most common mistake in all of game. Next most common mistake I see is the guy who's learned to escalate, but he's uncalibrated. He just escalates no matter what. So what happens is, assuming the girl just likes him, he may be able to escalate all the way to sex. But in most interactions, there will be some highs and lows. And as soon as that guy gets into a negative place, he's gonna escalate, and then the girl's gonna reject him because she's uncomfortable with the escalation, uncomfortable with him. What he needs to do instead is stop escalating at that moment when it's bad, get the interaction good again, and then only once it's good, continue to escalate further. If you eliminate those 2 mistakes, you probably, with that alone, have gotten better than 80% of all guys I've seen in pickup. That's how important this idea of escalating at the right times only is.
You're one of the most beautiful girls I've ever seen.
Thank you, but I think my mouth is too big.
No, it's the right size. For me, that is.
Next up, let's talk technique. There's a way you can escalate to virtually eliminate the possibility of rejection, and it's called invisible escalation. All right, this is a concept I came up with years ago, and basically the way it works is this. You're gonna escalate in such small amounts that each and every one is imperceptible, but because you're escalating constantly, as per the straight line persuasion model that we talked about a minute ago, because it's constant, you still escalate very, very, very rapidly, all right? So perhaps instead of going for like a big thing like, hey, and go for a big awkward hug, you might just reach out your hands, and if they take your hands, great. If they don't, it's just a gesture and you keep on talking, okay? So the idea is you're gonna be escalating constantly, but instead of doing one big escalation, you might do that in 2 or 3 smaller moves that are imperceptible and not a big deal if they don't work out. I'm gonna show you an example of that right now. This is like a halo over you right now that I'm drawing in the air.
Is it?
Except I think that's lying to myself and the world, but that's okay. I'm trying.
It's not lying.
Hi, red hair. Who are you? My name is Todd. You're adorable.
My name is.
What is your name? Sorry, you cannot touch my long phallic object. That doesn't happen.
I wouldn't even.
That doesn't happen until with people I know. I don't know you well enough for that yet.
I wouldn't even try.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. I feel much more safe around you now. I was a little unconfident and shy.
I can make you feel comfortable.
Can you really?
I can.
So as you could see there, I ended up escalating very quickly. We're hugging on the street within just a matter of seconds. However, it wasn't that I just like awkwardly went for it, right? What did I do? I put my hand out. When she took it, fine. I subtly pulled in because she responded well to that, fine. I extended my other arm and invited her for a hug, and now we're there and things go very, very well. So instead of one big move, it was 3 small moves, any of which were sort of imperceptible and could not have been rejected. Finally, we have the concept of tension. And this is something that I've been doing for years in my game, but I'd never really explained until now, all right? And the concept here, the phrase you want to keep in mind is, don't hard escalate without a value gap. Now let me explain to you what that means. First of all, there's what I call hard escalation and soft escalation. So we talked about invisible escalation. By the nature of that, every escalation move you're making is a soft escalation. It's a little advancement. It's not a big deal. It's not a major event in the interaction, okay? There are certain escalations that are by their nature a hard escalation. You know they happen and they make a big difference. For example, going for the kiss is a hard escalation. Taking the girl home is a hard escalation. Taking the girl away from her friends is a hard escalation, okay? Or getting very sexual, taking clothes off is a hard escalation, all right? You know those are happening. It's very clear that things are moving towards sex. It's very clear the nature of the move, all right? Now, for a lot of escalation, as long as you're in a good place, you should be escalating. However, for these hard escalations, they're a lot more risky, and they're actually risky in two ways. One, they're risky in the sense that if you try them and fail, you will have lost a lot of social capital. It may really kind of ruin the interaction, okay? And if you don't have enough social capital, you will fail at them. But secondly, the problem is that if you do too much of them, if you try and kiss too much or you try too much to pull home, you ruin the sexual attention. You make it very clear what your agenda is, and you make it very clear who's chasing who, and that the taking the girl home or kissing or sex, it didn't just happen. It was something contrived. All right, so these are dangerous escalations because they're so obvious. Okay, so it's very critical in these particular cases, the cases of the hard escalation, that not only do you be in that range of the interactions good that we talked about, but also that you have what I call a value gap. All right, what that means is the girl needs to feel at that moment that you are cooler than her, smarter than her, better than her, that your life is more fun than hers. In some way, she needs to see you as a win for her or an escalation of her life, okay? When that's the case, you will be able to do these hard escalations, and in fact, the girl will be very receptive and very grateful for them. If you try and make these hard escalations without that value gap, the girl will feel like she's being used, the girl will feel like you have an agenda, the girl will lose that sexual tension and lose that, does he like me, does he not like me, and it will be a set ender. And I see so many guys doing this, right? Because what happens is they're doing a lot of teasing, push-pull, things that build their value early on, but then when it comes time for these hard moves, that's typically when you're building comfort with the girl. It's typically when you've kind of already agreed you like each other, and the problem is if the girl gets a little too comfortable, if that value gap is lost, all of a sudden, making out, taking her home, they become very hard to actually make happen, and you get a lot of resistance from the girl, all right? So it's very, very critical you have that value gap. Now, how do you know when you have that value gap? Well, one, you can know based on the nature of the interaction. If she's constantly complimenting you, telling you how cool you are, responding to you, following your lead, that's a good indicator. But on a shorter term, there's a lot of things like the girl reacting to you, getting flustered, qualifying herself, nervous gestures, all those kind of things indicate a value gap in the short term. And obviously, the bigger the escalation or the harder the escalation, the more value gap you're gonna need, okay? But the fundamental concept is this: if there's no value gap, if you're on an even level with her in terms of value, or if you're below her in terms of the perceived value in the interaction, don't go for the hard escalation then. Instead, focus on building your value first before you go for the hard escalation. So it's similar in a way to the straight line persuasion model where you're building something in order to escalate, but in this case, it's not the pleasantness or how good the interaction is, it's the perceived value. And it's a very critical distinction when you get to that level of advanced game.